Here in a Kentish hop garden, harvesting goes on, like it's done every October for 400 years. The pattern of a whole landscape given over to our national taste for beer. This farm at Smarden has 26 acres of hop garden. Once picked, the hops are taken to the oast house, which has become the hallmark of the Kent countryside. The hop farmer here is Arnold Batt.
Father came here in 1921 and farmed it till 1942, and then I took it on from then. Way back in about 1890 to 1900, nearly every little small farm, nearly everybody growed hops, and therefore your oast house to dry the hops on. We have the kiln for a start where the hops are dried. You have your fire, used to be fire in the first oast houses, you know, just an ordinary brick fire, burning coal. And it's natural draft up through the kiln. And later, you see, they've been converted by fans, electric and oil burners and what have you. Yeah. Well, the hops are above it, you know, on a higher floor. And by the natural shape of the building, draws the air up through. So it keeps the fire going and dries them out. Yeah, it draws the air up through when you've got a funnel at the top, you see. Yeah, larger air at the bottom and a narrow top, then it draws the air up through. It's an host cowl, swivels round, keeps the area free from rain coming in and things like that. But an host house today, you see, is only just a conventional type of building. You don't need any kilns or cowls or anything like that.
Why not?
Well, the forced air and the fans they have now, you see, you don't need any type of host house at all, really. No.
So we won't see any more host houses built?
No, don't think so. No.
Is that a pity?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, really.
Do you think there's a question of the host houses might disappear?
No, unless you can get planning permission on them, you know, and live in them now.
What do you think of that?
Oh, I think it's better than knocking them down. Especially round Kent, it looks keeping with the county in it. But
Even today, the Weald still has the calm atmosphere of a remote country district, making it hard to believe that London lies just 40 miles away. Over the hop gardens, neatly hedged fields, orchards and small coppices, the oast houses stand sentinel. The fortunes of the Weald were founded equally on fruit. The famous orchards have supplied the needs of Londoners since Tudor times. Often called the Garden of England, it is at least London's own back garden. The tiny fields make pocket-sized settings for the comfortable domestic buildings. It all began with houses like this, a particularly fine example of the timber-framed Wealden house. These gardens and fountains are apparently later additions, but the house itself has seen many changes too. When you go inside, you see the evidence of a 14th century building. It was built by local monks for a village priest and remained a priest's house until the time of Henry VIII. Someone who takes a personal interest in its history is Major Kinsey.
This is a typical example of an early Wealden manor house. You don't find this type of shape of a building in other counties of this period. Of course, when we're talking about a Wealden house, this was one of the greatest supplies of oak in the whole country. The Weald, by name, means a huge forest. The house itself, in its attributes that show it as a Wealden house, are really best shown from the outside.
And what you can see are sloping gables or hips and a recessed central bay. The two side bays are marked by overhanging jetties.
This type of house would be actually prefabricated in that all the major timbers would be set up and then pegged in and eventually erected into the one big house, and then the spaces between the different major beams would be filled in with wattle and daub. And when we were carrying out some restoration in this house, we came across various examples of medieval cow dung in between the major beams in the house. These oriel windows would be typical of the better class houses of their period in England. It is one window going straight up, but they've been halved because of from the inside by the installation of the floor of the drawing room. There was no ceiling when this house was constructed. The ceiling came to be built and the chimneys put in about the year 1530. It's often referred to as a style of a hall house.
A vast and ornamental crown post props up the enormous weight of the tiled roof and transfers the burden to the collar beam, and from that to posts that run down to the ground.
But the whole of the weight really is coming down through these two massive pieces of oak in the center, and then dragon beams in the coach. You can see there in the kitchen and in the library, that angled beam, that is helping to take the strain of the weight of this. And of course the foundations of this are literally resting on the ground, and they're timber foundations. And hence the slight angle that you might have noticed when you were coming to the house, owing to a certain amount of subsidence in the soil, and the house is tilted. You see behind me here how those doors are at an angle. The influence of a major house like this would be felt throughout the area.
Everywhere you look in this part of Kent, you can see echoes of this distinctive pattern of a timber-framed Wealden house. Many of them no longer have any connection with farming. Yet it is possible to find, in the depths of the Kent countryside, places where the character remains very much that of a working farm, as with the Bridgeland sisters.
Grandfather farmed here, you see, until father was old enough. A mixed farm, yes. A few cows, what they called nurse cows to bring up calves, and a flock of sheep, and 2 horses in those days, and a lot of hens, about 400 running free range, and of hops, you see, and corn, mixed.
So you grew your own hops, did you? Yeah?
Yes, picked them by hand.
Did hand picking until 1973 when we gave up the hops, and had the London people down in huts to pick them. It was all enjoyable. We used to help run the hop garden, head it, and had men to do the work.
A very jolly company, really. Lots of fun.
Mm.
Most modern kitchens tend to be very clinical, but this one is a real old farmhouse kitchen. It was a place for a whole range of activities: curing and salting, laundry and cooking. It was the hub of the household. But though it may look haphazard, even the sloping, well-worn floors have a
That
purpose.
is, well, you see,
It's on the slope for the water.
You just put water and
throw
scrub it with
water
a
and
broom.
scrub with a broom. And the 3 outlets for the water to drain away.
So it's designed like that, is it?
Oh, yes,
Yes,
sloping.
it's designed just slightly on the slope.
And what do you do for water here then?
Well, no
Tank.
water now, but
No, that tank
used
you
to be a
see
big rainwater tank there, you see.
It's rather
That's the
nice.
pipe, you
pipe.
see, and that's the water. We've been using it. It usually stands up
It's very,
high.
when it's not used much, it usually runs out there, you see.
Yes,
Oh,
it was the only
All
water.
at home.
Until 1945 we had the main water.
And before that you used the well?
The well for cooking, drinking, and this for cleaning. And yes. And the coppers, you see, to fill to use it, to heat, to do washing. Make a fire for this one and round the corner for the other one.
Round there's the other one.
In the washing days, the clothes were put in the copper and boiled, taken out and rinsed. That was the old way.
We do cooking, used to do cooking there, till we had the electricity and bake in the brick oven.
Where's that?
The brick ovens are there, you see, yes. In that one, we baked in that brick oven, or that small one there. Make a lot of bread for a week's supply, and cakes, and pies. And it was a real, well, the morning's work, really, baking. It was beautiful. Then we'd cook on there and cook the Christmas puddings in a big, large, round pot.
Whereabouts do you actually do
Hang
it?
it on that pottocks.
Can you show me
They're
how
the
that works?
pottocks.
Oh,
Those.
How does that work?
It should
I
work
don't
like
think
that.
they
yeah.
slide very well. They're rusty.
Rusty. So they slide up and down. You can adjust them in a big boiler with water. And also I was going to say, hams, they would kill a pig where you are, that hook, and it would hang down to the ground, a big pig, and my father would cut it all up into pork and sausages made, and the hams would be dried up there in the chimney.
Would you like to have one of those very big modern kitchens now?
Well, I don't know because I haven't experienced that. Although when I've been away, of course, they have more modern. But this, you see, this really doesn't matter if it is a bit shabby. It's old.
Old, and like so many Wealden farmhouses, it has traditional Kent hanging tiles on one end. Les Bloomfield is making the old kind of tiles at the Swallow Works, one of the last handmade tile makers in the country. Les is the fastest worker here. He makes 1,000 tiles a day. He's the sort of craftsman who's appreciated in a family business like this, where 57 years ago, Fred Pelling started work.
Old Mr. Swallow, Raymond Swallow, who founded it, he was still alive. And he ran the yard until just after the war ended. And from then, one of the sons, Mr. Jack Swallow, he took over. And when he died, Mr. Hector Swallow, he took over. And when he died, Mr. Keith Swallow took over. And when he passed away, the governor who we got now, Mr. Raymond Swallow. So how many's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 generations of Swallows.
Swallow tiles came to this spot because of the quality of the clay.
The clay's ideal and there's so much of it. We can go right out the other way for half a mile and it's still beautiful clay. I mean, you could travel all over England and keep finding clay pits, but perhaps you wouldn't get the right clay like we've got here, so we're lucky. We should never run out because we've got miles of it. and it goes through 4 sections in the mill, and it comes out a perfect texture. We call those sods. That is the right name for them, a sod. They bring up 10 on a barrow, put them round the table like that for the maker, and then they pick them up and cut them up with their wire. They first told me that the Romans were the first to make handmade clay tiles. We make about 6 different shapes. The most popular is a club tile. Then you get a beaver, arrowhead, or so forth. But we can make any design. You get a pair of red tiles in a house in the woods, or the fields all around, they look lovely.
But the tiles hanging on the side of a house aren't just there for decoration. They give added protection. Kent is surprisingly cold, with harsh easterly winds sweeping in from Europe in the winter. Another local way of coping with these conditions is to have overlapping weatherboards which shield poor quality brickwork or flimsy timbers. In stark contrast to the Weald is Romney Marsh. The two areas are closely linked because the cattle and sheep used to be brought down to graze here on the open marsh. Absolutely flat, since it was once under the sea, there are very few houses. Someone who knows the marsh well is Roger Addy.
Well, I've been a looker all my life. Well, I reckon I took the job over when I was 15. I went and started doing one lot myself till I was 79.
And you said you were a looker. What?
Looker. Well, that's what they call them on Romney Marsh. See? Shepherd, they call them most places, but there's looker on Romney Marsh. It's hard work for people who haven't done it. But it was easy to me. I was brought up to it, you see. Yeah. I'd go out, my father drove him when I was 5 years old.
So your father was a looker as well?
Oh, yes, he was a looker. Yeah, he came down from Carnarvon down on the marsh, 1903.
And you were saying that there aren't many houses on the...
There weren't many houses on the marsh, not in them days, no. One here and one there, right away.
Tell me why you have then, in the middle of all this open fields and things, do you have this brick?
Well, that was for lambing. You see, probably man was lambing out in that field. Well, he had this place here. Well, where was his house? Right over there. Perhaps he was somewhere else right away. Well, he got somewhere to have his meal in, and then he had a fire in there. And if that was very cold, he got a weekly lamb. He went and took it in front of the fire, and then drop a gin and some milk.
It's almost a bit like a lamb sort of hospital.
Yes, this was sort of a hospital.
And did people actually look asleep in there as well?
Oh, they used to. Yeah, used to sleep in there years ago.
And who put these buildings up?
Oh, the old farmers years ago. Years ago they done that. Of course, this place was all right in a nice warm day. A wet day, you went out in the lambing field. That was when you was wanted out there. It's when it's wet and cold, that's the worst of it. That's when you want this place.
Just on the edge of Romney Marsh, on the coast at Hastings, you find some more strange buildings. These fishermen's huts are unique in Britain, and their origins remain a bit of a mystery. Even to Frank Edmonds, who's been a fisherman all his life.
They're called net shops. That's what their grandpa was called, and that's what we call them, you know, it's just gone in, and we never call them huts, they're just called shops. Well, I don't really know the exact age, but they tell me they're in the 1700s. But one yarn is that they survivors of the Spanish Armada are supposed to have started building them, but whether there's any truth in that or not, I don't know. Yeah, one of the old fishermen told me that he remembers one being built in the 1901 or 1904 when as they built one of the luggers. They built one of these net shops to put his gear in. So presumably they used a odd piece of wood, you know. One story is that all the grain belonged to the Board of Trade, and they built them up high to save paying grain rent. But the other theory is that they built them high so that there's 3 different floors to put their different kinds of nets in, you know, herring nets, mackerel nets, and whatever nets, you know, sprat nets.
But presumably you could build, 3 separate little rooms on the ground.
Yeah, but if you're paying grain rent, you're causing you more rent, isn't it? Whereas if you go up, you can keep going up, make it that much cheaper.
Net shops and lookers' huts are strictly practical buildings. Back in the Weald, the same used to be true of the old farmhouses. But as much as 300 years ago, Londoners first began to come out to indulge their romantic notions of the countryside, like the man who built Crossways Farm.
I think that it was basically a city gent, probably, or somebody who struck it rich in Guildford or whatever. Slightly self-conscious, I think, even when it was built, yes. It doesn't need to be quite as grand as that, does it? And in fact, it's a very ambitious house, isn't it, with all that decorated brickwork and so on a not very large frontage.
Hilary Cork is the present owner of Crossways Farm.
We don't know precisely when it was built, but probably about 1620. It was built possibly by a wool merchant, certainly somebody who suddenly struck it rich, because there's the remains of an older Elizabethan house, which is quite modest, and then this rather grand little provincial castle-ette was put up by probably a merchant who wanted it to live in and to retire to, perhaps.
Is there any reason to have the sort of walled garden? I mean, is there any?
I think it is a desire for solitude, really. I mean, obviously the excuse is that your plums ripen more quickly if you've got walls around them. But I think it's a sense of what is called a hortus conclusus, that you shut yourself off from the world outside. You feel a bit grander.
And in many ways that's true. I mean, an Englishman's home is his castle.
Yes, I think so. It's a tiny castle. It's got the possibilities of gracious living in a sort of country context. It's difficult to express, really. But I don't fancy it being simply full of, of honest, sweating labourers toiling away and falling asleep in the evening after whacking up the turnips, I think this part of the country has always been extremely prosperous in every century, and I have a feeling that it's always been rich and comfortable. I mean, people have had to work all right, but they haven't lived in poverty and degradation, and it's an area, it seems to me, where the good old days is actually true.